Hello everyone, welcome back to Steam Code. This is part 2 of our circle splitter tutorial series using D3.js and JQuery. And in this video we're going to be adding the handlers and a few other functions that'll make the handlers work. So before we actually create the function add handlers, just add the call to the function here at the bottom of the page. And right above where we created the apply attributes function, we can add the actual function. Okay, so within your function add handlers, we're going to use D3 to select all of the circles. So we'll say D3 dot select all circle, and then we'll say dot on mouse enter function. So what this is saying is for each of the circles that's on the page, once your mouse has entered that circle, then do whatever's inside of this function. So we can say if this dot get attribute r is greater than 2. So if the radius is greater than 2, we're not going to split any circles with a radius less than 2, because that'll make the computer move slow, and also you can't really see that anyways. Then we're going to create 4 new circles. So we're going to say var c1 is equal to d3 dot select svg dot append circle, and copy this 3 more times. So what this is doing is it's adding 4 new circles to that SVG element that we created in the last video. Then underneath this, we're going to add all 4 of these circles to an array. So we'll say var array is equal to C1, C2, C3, and C4. And then we're going to use a function called add data. This we have not created this function yet, but we're going to call it right now, and then we're going to create it a little later in the video. So add data, this dot get attribute cx, this dot get attribute cy, this dot get attribute r. And then what this function does is, oops, I forgot to make that a period. What this function does that we're going to create is it sets the data for each of the 4 circles that we just created. And then we're going to say data dot splice this dot get attribute id 1. So what this data dot splice does is it removes the ID of the circle we just hovered over from the data array. And then we're going to say var current circle is equal to document dot get element by ID, this dot get attribute ID. And then what we're going to do is we're going to remove this circle. So we can say current circle dot remove. So now we've completely removed this circle from the list of circles so that it no longer appears on the page once we've hovered over it. And then what we're going to do next is we're going to reset all of the IDs using another function that we haven't yet created. So we'll say reset IDs. what this does is it resets all of the IDs to consecutive integers, because once we've deleted the circle, then there's a gap within the IDs, and we want to get rid of that gap by resetting all of them. And then we're going to add the same handler to the 4 new circles that we just created. So we'll say for var I equals 0, I is less than 4, I plus plus, and then the array that we just created, I dot on mouse move add handlers. So we're adding the new handler to each of those 4 circles that we just created. And that's all we need for this function. So now let's actually create the add data function so we can add that data to all of these circles. So we'll say function add data. And then remember we had 3 parameters: the x coordinate, the y coordinate, and the radius. And then this first piece of data will represent the top left circle that it will appear. So data.push and then the x will be the current x minus the radius plus the radius divided by 2. I've already calculated this, and this will make the new circle appear in the top left. And then y will be y minus r plus r divided by 2. The radius will just be half the radius of the bigger circle, so r divided by 2. And the ID will be count, the count variable, remember, we created in the last video. And then each time we do that, we're going to increment count by 1. So we'll say count plus plus, and we'll do the same thing for the other 3 circles that we're going to be creating. So for the second one, this will be the bottom left. The x coordinate will remain the same. The y coordinate will be y minus r plus r times 1.5. The radius will remain the same, and the ID will still be count. So now for the top right, paste it again. This time we're going to be changing the x variable, so that will be r times 1.5 instead of r divided by 2. And then the bottom right. Now we're going to be changing both variables, so that'll be r times 1.5 for x, and the same thing for y, r times 1.5. Alright, and that's really all we need for this function. So now let's create the last function that we're going to need, and this will reset the IDs to consecutive integers. So we'll say function reset IDs, and then we'll say for var I equals 0, I is less than data.length, I plus plus, and then we'll say data I dot ID is equal to I. So what this is doing is just resetting each of the circles that's within the data array to consecutive integers. So now let's see how this actually works. So hop into where you have your file stored. You can reload, and as you can see, it disappears. So that means that there's a problem with creating the circles and actually making them appear. Let's check that out. Okay, so there are actually 2 problems that need to be fixed. Here inside of our add handlers function, we forgot to apply the attributes after we added the data. So the data is actually not being applied to this new circles that we created. So make sure you add that apply attributes call to the function. And then within the actual apply attributes function, over here where we're creating the selection variable, change circles to circle. And if you save that and navigate back to where you have your file stored, as you can see, it works just as intended. Alright, so if you enjoyed the video, please leave a like and subscribe, and you guys can add whatever you want to this project. Try adding some gradient so that once a circle splits, it changes color. Maybe try adding an image so that once the circle splits, a new image appears in each circle. Try adding what you want, and leave your ideas in the comments about what we should add next. And if you enjoyed, check out our GitHub, check out our Patreon. We have some cool stuff on both platforms, and I will see you guys next time.